Okay, so we've got to remember that mutations are actually mistakes. They're an error in the genes of a creature, and they can only occur in the reproductive organs. It's no point to evolution if the mutations are happening in other parts of the body. It's got to happen in the reproductive organs. So it's a chance, it's a mistake, and it has to be passed on to the next generation as something that's actually going to work for the creature to survive and evolve into something else. So just going to be looking at the cygnathids, because that's an area that I've got a lot to do with our seahorse farm. So we breed the seahorses down here in Tassie. We send them all around the world. And we talked about these a couple of times on the show, but I'll just refresh a little bit. They're a group of animals. They're a family of animals that include the seahorse, but also sea dragons, which are only found in Australia in the wild. There's only 3 species of sea dragon, and there's a number of pipefish, pipe horses, and pygmy pipe horses, creatures that are sort of halfway between a seahorse and a pipe horse, if you like. So I'm going to focus mostly on the breeding part of this, because they're an interesting bunch of animals where the male gives birth. He has a pouch. In fact, the seahorse that you can see there, if you look closely in his belly region, you can see a soft pouch there. That's a male, and that's where he holds the baby. It's the only creature known where the male actually gets pregnant and gives birth. But in the other animals, the pipefish, the pipe horses, the sea dragons, they don't necessarily have pouches. Some of them do. They often hold the eggs on the tail or under the trunk of the body with little egg caps or part pouches and things like this. So this is what we're going to look at. But it's the seahorse's navel that is novel. So an evolutionary novelty is something that you don't generally see in other creatures. It's something that's, the evolutionists would say, has evolved, a novelty that's evolved. And this particular paper that I'm focusing on today says this, that evolutionary novelties adorn the tree of life, and yet their genetic origins remain a problem for biologists. And I'm proposing that, and we propose here at Creation Research, that the problem that they have is because they're starting with the wrong premises. They're starting with the premise that things have evolved and weren't created. Indeed, just a few sentences later, they say that the origin of novelties is now routinely viewed through the lens of evolutionary developmental biology. And there's their problem there. That's why they have issues finding out where these novelties come from and arise. So just a very simple recap of what evolution really is saying, that less complex animals evolve into more complex animals. To do that, to get from an amoeba to a complex human being or any other complex organism, you've actually got to gain genetic information. It's not just about errors in genes, it's about actually gaining new genes along the way. Whereas creation is going completely the other way. You're starting with complex created animals by an almighty creator, and you're ending up in a now corrupted world with less complex or specialized animals within the same created kind. So there is some levels of change, and Diane, I think, will probably discuss this a little bit more. There's some level of change, but overall, the genetic information is lost. So it's going in a completely different direction. So here's the proposed evolutionary program for seahorses. So it's evolving upwards from the bottom line, and you'll notice there on the grey line at the bottom it says an unknown ancestor. They've got no idea about what that could have been, really. You get up to the brown bar there, and it talks about pipefish that don't have a brood pouch. There's no pouch yet in them. You get up to the next level, the red one, the pipefish now has a brood pouch, and there are pipefish fishes out there with brood pouches and some without, or certain levels of them. Then you get up to the yellow one, you've got the pipefish-like pygmy pipe horse, and it's saying that a prehensile tail evolves, and we have talked about that in past programs. That's the tail that curls up and can hold on to things, so the pipefish down the bottom can't do that. But then you continue up, and the blue seahorse-like pygmy pipe horse has a lot more features of a seahorse, and then you get to the seahorse at the top. Now, when you look over the top right, it's saying that all major evolutionary stages have surviving representatives, and that is indeed the case in this family. Now, this might be something that surprises some Christians and creation followers, that we are proposing that this group of animals may well have come from the one original created kind. But we're not proposing that they've evolved. We're proposing that it goes the other way. They've devolved. It starts with a seahorse or a seahorse-like creature, and through mutations and modifications and losses, as the creation model predicts, creatures lose or have mutations that aren't great for them. They lose information, and it's going completely the other way. And it's saying there's no missing links. Well, that actually supports the creation model as well, because you would expect, if they're all still alive, then it's happened in relatively recent times, over thousands of years and not millions. So indeed, my wife was at a conference in Florida a number of years ago, and one of the biologists there said this about pipefish, that the long bodies of pipefish have evolved from a mutation in growth regulating genes. So the genes that control the shape of the body have mutated, and that's a mistake. Remember, it's a mistake, and therefore they've kept elongating rather than taking the shape of the normal seahorse. So let's focus on the actual brood pouch, however. These are the range of brood pouch levels that you can get across the family of sygnathids. You have the fully enclosed pouch, which is what the seahorse has. So you can see on the far right of this picture, a male Tasmanian seahorse, the Hippocampus abdominalis, that's got that big pillow-like pouch. Then you can have an enclosed type pouch that has an inverted slit, I suppose you'd say, down the side, and it sort of opens inwards, and the animals, the babies, would come out from there. Then you have an enclosed type of pouch that is everted, and this is an example of one of those, ribboned sea dragon it's called, and we've had these at our facility. Beautiful animal, and it was long thought just to be a pipefish, because often it's found as a dead creature washed up on a beach without those growths, those extensions on its body, and so it was long thought just to be a pipefish, but is now, they're calling it a sea dragon, and this is some of the ways evolution works. It's what you call them, not really anything else that's pointing to evolution. So they actually, their pouch slits open outwards. So the best way I can describe this is like a flasher down the park wanting to show you things that you shouldn't see, opening his coat, and the flaps of their skin sort of open like that, and they wiggle their body, and we've seen this happen, and that's how they release the live young. And then you have a much lesser pouch, a semi-enclosed one. Then you actually have individual egg compartments. So a weedy sea dragon can be like this, where they're almost like little egg cups on the tail. And then you get lesser and lesser rudimentary plates. So the banded pipefish can have just little bits of skin sort of holding onto the eggs exposed on the undertail. And then you can have unprotected eggs that are just stuck on to the body. So this is the range of pouch situations you can see in this family. Evolution model is saying basically that it's gone this way. The pipefish has gained all of these things over time and ended up with a pouch, a prehensile tail, bent head, different form, and becomes a seahorse. The creation model is saying they were either created as completely separate kinds, but because there's so many similar features with the fused snout, the tails and so on, I tend to believe that they probably were an originally created kind that have devolved from a seahorse downwards through mutations and losses of genes and things like that. In fact, can pregnancy come from random mutations? The fact that it's the male that gives birth, can that just happen through mutations? But just look at how many genes are actually involved in this. This is from the paper that I was focusing on. Our genome-based analysis of male pregnancy in the Gulf pipefish revealed a transcriptionally rich brood pouch in which over 73% of annotated genes, that's the genes that they've sort of identified and noted, so not even all of the genes, were expressed robustly, and over 1,000 of the genes that they were looking at were differentially expressed as a consequence of pregnancy. So basically they're saying the genes, there's 1,000 genes of the ones that we've looked at that are turned on as a result of pregnancy. There's no small number of genes. It's not just a mutation in one or two genes that are involved in the pregnancy. They're admitting that there's over 1,000 of them. Now, that takes an extraordinary faith to believe that that can happen by chance. But where did pipefish come from in the first place? So they're saying in their paper that gene losses and other changes have occurred in pipefish gene families, which are candidate mechanisms for the evolution of all of these traits in the cygnathid family, including an elongated axis and the loss of ribs, pelvic fins, and teeth. Now this, as I read through this quite extensive paper, over and over again, they were talking about the loss of genes, the loss of gene groups, the loss of features. Over and over again, it's the loss of things. And this is not evolution. This is a loss. Someone writing on this particular paper said this: the two cygnathid genomes, which is pipefish and seahorse, that they're talking about, show that losses in specific genes or gene functions are responsible for evolutionary innovations. Now, that's really, when you think about it, a stupid statement. That is just ridiculous that you can believe that evolution is a result of losing information. In fact, the paper itself talks about multiple losses of genes. So from a book, a very extensive book on seahorses generally, by Rudy Kuda, an Australian guy, great, very experienced in fish and seahorses and this family in particular, and the bit highlighted there in yellow, he says that in fossils, the various features that were common between different groups may have degenerated in modern species such as certain fins. Some extinct forms represented links between different living groups. Now, that may be so. I don't hold tightly to that. But if anything, it's showing the degeneration that the word that he uses himself in that statement, have degenerated in modern species. This is not evolution. So I'll just finish with just my own worded statement about what evolution's prediction is. So we're often criticised in creation circles that we're not science because we don't make predictions, and that's utterly false. Evolution makes a prediction, and effectively in this area it's saying that accumulated genetic mutations allow an almost limitless range of possible life forms to evolve from single-celled organisms. In fact, it's worse than that, because the single-celled organisms have to evolve from dirt or a primordial soup, and that's never been shown to be possible either. So you've got all of the ranges of life on Earth today have arisen from errors in a genetic code originally from at least a single-celled organism that didn't have that many genes. Whereas creation's predictions are that there's genetic boundaries. And so this is what I've suggested, that speciation may occur due to mutations, gene loss, or genetic rearrangement. So there's three parts to this. It's not just mutations, as in the paper I've just proposed there, that gene losses occur and may stop things forming as they normally would have, or in fact genetic rearrangement in the chromosomes, but that only happens within the created kind. So our challenge is to define ultimately what a created kind is, and if we had a fraction of the resources that the evolutionary science bodies do, then we might be a lot closer to knowing what some of those created kinds are. But it doesn't finish there. The degree of possible change is always limited by the effect that the accumulated gene degradation has on a creature's ability to survive. So if those gene faults or losses end up causing such a disastrous impact on the animal that it dies or can't survive properly, then it's extinct, it's gone. But if the change is such that it can still survive, then it'll be there, and you'll see that. And that's what I think is happening within the cygnathid family group.